आई थिंक यू कैन रिलेट विद मी। कई ऐसी आजमाइशें हमारी ज़िंदगी में आती हैं और बाद में हम सोचते हैं काश कि मैं उस आजमाइश में ना कर देता। समथिंग दैट आई एम गोइंग टू फोकस ऑन टुडे इज बी बोल्ड, say no. Most of the things that my father said, or the advice that he gave me, I said no to that. And a lot of time I had to see the consequences of that. And the consequences sometimes were real bad. सो दानियल की किताब जो आज मैंने मैसेज के लिए पिक की, चैप्टर 1 वर्सेस दैट जस्ट वर रेड in Hindi and in English. So something that I'm going to focus on today is be bold, say no. Be bold, say no. And I don't know about you, but for me, there have been times in my life when saying no to something has been very, very difficult. Has it been your case? Saying no to something was very difficult. I think you can relate with me. कई ऐसी आजमाइशें हमारी ज़िंदगी में आती हैं, कई ऐसी temptations हमारी ज़िंदगी में आती हैं जब हमें कुछ कहना, हम कुछ कह रहे होते हैं और हमें वो कुछ नहीं कहना चाह रहे, और बाद में हम सोचते हैं काश कि मैं उस आजमाइश में ना कर देता या ना कह देता या ना कह देती। हम बहुत सारे ऐसे काम बाज़ औक़ात कर जाते हैं जब हमें बाद में सोचते हैं कि काश मैं उस वक्त इस काम को ना कर देता और आज मैं इस एम्बैरेसमेंट से बच जाती। राइट? कैन यू रिलेट टू दैट? मेरी ज़िंदगी में बहुत से ऐसे मौके आए जहाँ पे मैंने, जब मुझे ना कहना चाहिए था, अनफॉर्चुनेटली मैंने ना नहीं कहा। फॉर एग्जाम्पल, a time of confession. I was a rebellious child in my childhood. At least for first 20 to 25 years, I was a rebellious child. Most of the things that my father said, or the advice that he gave me, I said no to that. Not like no in verbally, but through my action. I said no. And a lot of time I had to see the consequences of that. And the consequences sometimes were real bad. Sometimes those were related to my education, sometimes that were related to, and one time in my life, I refused to say something no that was related to my friends, and my friends, I did not have a good company. And I should have said no to that thing that we were going to do, and I did not, and the consequences were worst. And I had to suffer for years. It brought me a lot of embarrassment, and it brought my family a lot of embarrassment. So that's what we are going to talk about. Daniel teaches us this afternoon through this text that he says no. It's a great story. I encourage you to read the book of Daniel if you haven't done that, especially first 5 or 6 chapters that are about the life of Daniel. There are different opportunities, there are different examples that he is so courageous and he is so bold that living in a foreign country, living in an exile, he is living as an exile in that country. He's serving the king, and there are times in his life when he says no to the most powerful king of his time. You know, Babylon was the superpower of that time. And he says no many times in his life, that he says no to the most powerful king. And he teaches us a lot of great things that I encourage you to read that story. So this afternoon, today we are in this first chapter, and the year is 605 before Christ, when Babylon, King Nebuchadnezzar, attacked Judah and takes a lot of captives and brings them to Babylon with him. And among them there are 4 friends. Do we have teenagers? I can say teenagers. If you're a teenager, raise your hands. If you're a teenager, 15 to 18, 15 to 19, yeah. So something that I'm speaking directly to you now. Daniel was of your age when he was brought to Babylon. Daniel and his 3 friends, Daniel, Mishael, Hananiah, and Azariah. They were of your age when they were brought to Babylon. And then the king asked that bring me some good looking young boys from Babylon, from noble families, from kings' families, and he wanted to train them for 3 years. And after the 3 years period, they would enter into king's service. They would वो बादशाह के लिए काम नेबुकदनेस्सर के लिए काम करेंगे. और डैनियल और उसके 4 दोस्त जब ये पिक किए गए, क्योंकि उसमें कोई फिजिकल ब्लेमिश नहीं होना चाहिए था, कोई उसमें कोई ऐसी चीज़ नहीं होनी चाहिए थी. किंग ने कहा कि दे शुड बी परफेक्ट, दे शुड बी गुड लुकिंग, एंड दे शुड हैव ग्रेट एप्टीट्यूड ऑफ लर्निंग. So these 4 were picked. And those kids who were picked for that training, they were offered the food from king's table. And when Daniel knew that they were going to eat the food from king's table, he refused. He refused to Ashpenaz, who was in charge of that service. He said, hey, I'm sorry, but can you give us just vegetables and water to drink instead of the food and the meat that comes from the king's table and the wine that comes from the king's table? Now, you would think why he would refuse to eat from the king's table. What was the reason that he would refuse to and eat the food that would come from that king's table? This is why. Because the food that the king ate, that was sacrificed to the pagan gods before it was brought to the king. The wine that the king drank, that wine was sacrificed to the pagan idols, pagan gods, before that wine was brought to the king's table. And Daniel knew that. And Daniel remembered God's commandment that you would not eat anything that has been sacrificed to the idol. Now remember, Daniel is just a teenager, 15, 16, maybe 17 or 18. But his faith foundations were so strong. His parents raised their children, Daniel and other 3 children, in their faith. That faith was so strong that they remembered the Torah. They remembered that God would not allow for them to eat the food that had been sacrificed to the idols. Think about if you are Daniel. Think about if you are that teenager. Put yourself in Daniel's shoes, his friend's shoes. Now, if I am there, if I were one of the friends, I could have thought this. Okay, I am not in Judah anymore. The king has brought me about 700 miles away from Judah. I'm living in a new world. I'm a kind of slave here. No one is watching me. My parents are not around me. My friends are not around me. My pastor is not around me. The people that I knew, they're not around me. They're not watching anything. They're not seeing anything that I'm doing here. What's the big deal? I can eat the food. God would understand that because I'm in captivity, right? I'm going to be here for about 70 years because that would be the period for that captivity. So what's the big deal? I can eat that food. I can drink that wine. The best food that the king would eat, that was offered to them. I would say, okay, no problem. I can do that. But Daniel wouldn't do it because he knew that God would not approve that. So Daniel asked the in charge that gave them vegetables to eat and water to drink for at least 10 days. And he was so confident about that. And they say, give us the food for 10 days. And then compare our appearance with those who eat from the king's table and who drink from that wine from the king's table. And you can compare our appearance. And if we don't look better, or if we look any less than those, we will do whatever you ask, whatever you tell us to do. And the text tells that God changed the heart of that in charge. And he agreed, and he gave them vegetables, and he gave them water to drink. And after 10 days, when they looked greater than those who were eating from the king's table and drinking that wine. Daniel said no. He was being bold, wasn't he? He was being bold because he was new there. He was like slave. He was slave there. He was coming all the from away from Judah. That's what the Babylonians did, and their even names were changed because they wanted them to forget everything that they knew from backcountry. They wanted them to forget their culture. They wanted to forget them to forget their theology. They wanted them to forget their relationship with Yahweh, with their God, and they wanted them to learn everything of Babylon because they were taught they went into that training for 3 years. They were taught different languages of Babylon. They were taught different cultures of the Babylon. Everything that they could teach, they taught them. And after 3 years of training, the text tells us that these four men, Daniel and his friends, they were 10 times better in their understanding, in their wisdom, in their knowledge, 10 times better than the other people who were in that training. Friends, I wanted to share two news with you before the sermon actually, and I just missed that. Two news today. Number one is bad news, and the other one is good news. So I tell you the bad news. The bad news is I'm not as a great preacher as your pastor, Pastor Alfred is, and I'm not that great. The good news is that sermon is going to be shorter than that. He told me 30 minutes, but it is going to be a lot shorter than that. The point being is about saying no. In our everyday life today, there are a lot of things that we need to say no to. We are living in a different culture, are we? And the culture that we are living in today is there are a lot of things that we need to say no every day. Kids, you are in school, there are things that you need to say no every day. No matter you're in high school, no matter you're in middle school, the situation in public schools and in other schools, I don't want to pick on public schools. The kids, they want to do anything that they want to do. 2 years ago, I had the opportunity to teach in a private school where we lived. And I saw their kids, they sometimes would be caught vaping in the bathrooms, smoking in the bathrooms. That's the kind of culture that we are living in. Now, when you are with other kids, when you are in school with other kids, you are going to have a lot of temptation to do the things that your friends are doing. And you are going to have a lot of peer pressure of doing the things that your friends are doing. But that is the time when no one is watching you, when your parents are not there, when your pastor is not there, when the people that you have a lot of respect, they are not there, and you see that no one is watching you, you can do anything that you want. At that time, I ask you, I challenge you to remember, is God watching you? Is this something that you were taught in Sunday school? Will God permit you to do that or show that behavior if God is around? And God is always around you. Now, the young adults, you're not off the hook. You are not, because Daniel, he would serve in that kingdom for about all his life. In his first years, then he is a young adult, he will be there. He will say no to the king again. And then when he is in late age, in 70s or 80s, he will still say, you remember the story of Den of Lions? You remember that, right? Daniel is about 80 years of age when he is thrown into the den of lion. And why he was thrown into the den of lion? Because he refused to do something that the king told him to do. He refused to worship king, and he was thrown into the den of lion. And he was 80 years old. So how we build our children's faith right in the beginning, that stays with them all their life. That is what happened. That is what we learned from Daniel. That is what we learned from Daniel's friend's life. Their faith was so strong right in the beginning that they were able to say no when they were in teens. I told you my story that when I was young, I made some bad choices, said no to the things that my father told me to do, And I said, I refused to say no what my bad friends wanted me to do. I said, and I suffered. I suffered. But something that I feel myself proud is there came a time when I was able to say no to something that made me stand here today. I never thought I would be a pastor. I was in other field of another area of life. I was an entrepreneur, and when I came here, I was trained as an Oracle. Was certified as Oracle, and then I felt calling to become a pastor. And I was still waiting for my work permit, and I'm talking about 2012, probably 11 or 12. And I was in a seminary in Washington, D.C. I was working on my Master's of Divinity program, and at that time, I had decided that I would become a pastor. And the person who trained me in Oracle, I received my work permit. He came back to me and he said, "Hey, I have a job offer for you. Great job offer, 6-digit salary and everything. And I think this is the beginning and you should take it." Oh boy, that was a very difficult thing to say no to. Because I was here, my family was still in Pakistan. I needed money to bring them over. I needed to establish myself in this new country. But that is something was good that I said no to. And that still continues to be a kind of everyday thing that we need to say no to. Now, I'm talking to everybody, regardless what is your age. What are the things in your life, at work, in a friend circle, in a relationship circle, in family, that God is challenging you to say no to today? Is a gossip your thing? Anybody gossips here? I never saw a perfect church. Trust me. I'm here at a so no one gossips here? Oh, everybody does. Thank you. I'm still on the right planet. Thank you. Maybe God is saying to you today, God is challenging you today to say no to gossip. Maybe the people that you know they're not around, and you're talking to just one friend, and you're talking about someone else in the church, at your workplace, or wherever, and that is not a Christian behavior, is it? Maybe God is challenging you to say no to that habit and behavior. And if somebody starts gossip, this is what I have learned. If somebody starts talking about negative about other person, I have learned to change and to switch from the negativity to the positivity. Because everybody, friends, everybody has something good in them. Amen? So if you can just switch that negativity to some positive things about that person, you will be surprised how that conversation will change. So maybe God is challenging you to say no to gossip. Maybe God is challenging you to say no to what you browse on your screens. Is it a challenge for us today, friends? Even though you don't intentionally browse something that is bad, it just shows up on your screen, right? And God is challenging maybe you today to say no to and to just move on, right? Maybe God is challenging you today to say no to overspending. Because that is a lot of challenge, friends, regardless if you're an immigrant, it's a challenge for all of us. Especially, and I'm not picking up on any country, but this is just the fact. Because when Daniel and his friends came to Babylon, was a beautiful city. Babylon, the way it was built, especially the Hanging Gardens, they're one of the 7 ancient wonders. And these boys, 4 young boys, teenagers, when they went to Babylon, there was a lot of attraction for them that they had never seen in Judah, right? There was a lot of attraction for them. Beauty, splendor, everything. And when we immigrants, we come to this country, we want big houses, right? We want to have what others have, right? We want to have fancy cars like others have. And that brings us sometime, for a lot of people I have seen, into a lot of debt. And they have to work 2 jobs, they have to work 3 jobs to make that debt go away. And this is a problem for, especially for the immigrants, because I don't know what is your experience, but what I'm experiencing is our first generation of immigrants, they can't breathe. I mean, maybe the second or the third generation, they will enjoy some life, but first generation, we really have to work hard. So maybe something that God is challenging you this afternoon to say no to is overspending. Just live within your means. I know there is a lot of attraction because you want a good car that someone else is driving, and you want to have that, regardless you have those resources or not. So think about what is something in your life that God is asking you, God is telling you, God is challenging you to say no to them. Is it something that sexually immoral behavior that God is challenging you to say no to? Because friends, this is the culture that we are living in. This is it feels like sometimes we are living in Babylon because there is a lot of temptation around us. And when things seem normal in other cultures, in this culture, people who are living with each other under the same roof before marriage, that is fornication. Is it a sin according to the Bible? Yes, it is. But you will see that this is normal in this culture, and you may be tempted to say yes to that. You may be tempted to have some extramarital relationships. But maybe God is challenging you to say no to that. To be upfront. When you see those indicators, you alert yourself that no, I'm not letting myself go into that. What is this in your life that God is challenging you to say no to? Like Daniel said to that food and to that wine. And Jesus has set great examples for us to say no. You know, when Jesus was tempted in the wilderness, Jesus was hungry for 40 days and 40 nights. What was the most important thing for Jesus that moment? What was that? Food. He needed to eat something. And what is the temptation that Satan brought him to? Tell these stones to turn to bread. And what did Jesus say? No. What was the next temptation? He took him to the top of the mountain. And what did he do? He showed all the splendors of the world, the richness of the world, the things that every one of us would like to have in our lives. And he said, I will give everything to you if you just bow down to me and worship me. And we have that temptation every day, don't we? We want what the world has, right? But Jesus set an example for us. What did Jesus say? No. Third temptation, throw yourself down and the angels will pick you. What was he saying is, hey, reveal your identity, who you are. Tell them the world who you are. Is this not a temptation for us? We want to show the world that who we are. We want to be prideful. We want to, how dare you? I am who I am. And Jesus said, no. You got it wrong. Friends, I want to challenge you to think about this. One question during this week. What is something that God is challenging you to say no in your life? It may be an addiction. It may be excessive drinking. It may be something that is damaging to your health, your relationship, gossip, lies. What is that? You know God is speaking to you right now. What is something that you need to say no to? And God is challenging you to say no. Be bold, say no. And you would remember Apostle Paul's words that he said in Colossians. He said, do not conform to be this, let me read it, let me get it right. Do not be conformed to the world. We want to be conformed to the world because of all the attractions that we have. But what? Be transformed, utterly, totally changed by the renewing of your mind. And let me close with this, friends. Christianity is a counterculture religion. It is a counterculture religion. We are called to, you are called to live a counterculture life. Because if you are living in the manner that everyone else in this culture is living, how will you become the light and how will you become the salt of the world? Jesus lived a counterculture life. He challenged everything that the religious leadership was doing at that time. The Pharisees, they were praying outside, out there, and they were saying, well, we are praying. And Jesus said, no, hypocrites. That is not what you want to do. And in the synagogue, when Jesus preached, they were just saying, wow, a new teaching. Why they said it was a new teaching? Because it was different than what they were used to listen to. What the Pharisees, what the religious, what the priests, or what the synagogue leaders, they were teaching them, that was different than that. We are called to be the people who live their lives counterculture. We are not to conform to this world, but I remember this pastor, he said, and I will close with this. This is a great analogy, he said, to be a counterculture person. He said that the Christians, when you enter into a room, the Christians are not to be the thermometer of that room. Do you know what thermometer does, right? Thermometer picks the temperature of the room. He said, on the contrary, the Christians are called to be the thermostat of the room. You set the temperature. Does it make sense? That is what living in a countercultural life means. So my prayer for you, all of us, all of me, those of you who are online, my prayer for all of you is that may God give us the courage and the Holy Spirit enables us to live a life that is counterculture.